If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. For some context, I'm a 31-year-old female. I frequently visit the nearby provincial parks here that are generally well used in Canada. It's rare I end up on a hike not seeing at least one or two people. I grew up camping and hiking and feel very comfortable in nature. I always inform people where I'm going and when I should be back. Safety first, right? So one day last year, I was going stir crazy, so I took myself out to a popular educational centre. A branch of trails stem from this one spot. Now they're not long trails, but are all interconnected, so it's easy to create your own distance. It was midweek, so I wasn't expecting to encounter many people, maybe a school group at most. I grabbed my backpack, locked the car and head out. It was a beautifully sunny day, mid-autumn, so it was a little chilly out. I was listening to the sounds of nature surrounding me. Some squirrels, birds, even a deer crosses the trail at one point. I was sticking with the main trail, which had educational signs identifying different types of plants as you went along. I made my way up to the first little hill and made my way down the path where it takes a sharp turn. Up ahead, I caught sight of a man wearing a dark blue jacket. Strange, I hadn't seen any signs of this person or heard of them whatsoever. Normally, I'm comforted seeing someone else, but this time my gut was not happy. I made a note of what the person was wearing and went along. Blue Jacket had taken the path I wanted to take to create a longer hike. It would have been a lot more secluded and less travelled this way, just a nicer path generally. So for once, I tried to be smart, listen to my gut, to just follow the main route back to my car. I had about 2 kilometers to get back though. Clouds decided they wanted to skirt across the sky, making the woods a little dull and ominous. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling very unsettled. The trees casted finger-like shadows that did not help calm my imagination at all. One of my favourite spots on the main trail had a few massive boulders and rock formations smack in the middle that you have to go around. Really neat for photos and climbing on a normal day, but today they fill me with dread. I can't pinpoint why at first, until I found some scuffs around the base of the rocks going the wrong way round. The trail's very obvious which way to go, left, and these markings were wrong. It's like someone went the wrong way around the rocks, dragging their feet behind them. An animal? Maybe. I can't figure this out. I wanted to turn around and go back the way I came from, but that would have added 4 kilometers back to the car. I stuck close to the far side of the real path, keeping an eye close on the rock formation. As I made it to the other side of the rocks, I caught sight of some blue fabric, the same blue jacket I saw earlier. The person now suddenly ducks down, as if they're trying to avoid being seen. For Blue Jacket Man to reach the rocks before me, he either cut his own path through the woods or sprinted 5 kilometers. I don't like the prospect of either option. Maybe he was taking a leak. Yeah, I'll go with that. I pick up my pace and dug my phone out. I texted my usual hiking friend telling them the details in case I went missing. I glance behind me, and again I see him staring at me. I ran the rest of the way back to my car, hopping in, immediately locking the doors, and curiously, there's not a single other vehicle in the parking area. This place was nowhere near any towns, so I have no idea where this person came from. I took a couple of minutes to sort myself out in the car, and as I pull out to leave, I look at the trailhead, and that damn blue jacket was on the signpost that I had passed to get in my car, and no one's visible. I was so spooked out by this encounter that I refused to ever hike alone. So a few months ago, I was out hiking with my friend. We live in the mountains of Western MD, and we're about 6 miles into an 8-mile loop we have done frequently when we decide to take some pictures and eat a snack at the summit. This area of the trail had a park, branches, benches and tables, and parking lots. So we're sitting and talking, and I noticed a man just walking around the park alone. He was walking aimlessly, staring at his feet, which confuses me, as he's in jeans, a button-down shirt and not exactly hiking attire. We now decide to set off on the last 2 miles of the loop. This park goes downhill to the headquarters of the park and is cut out of the mountain/bank, and the end leg is the parking lot where your car is. You don't have a lot of visibility from the trail, and you have to walk single file. I was walking in front and talking to my friend. I turn to look at her, and I see the same man right behind her, following at a rudely close distance. I immediately got a gut-wrenching feeling. I noticed that he didn't have any backpack or hiking gear, and not even wearing boots. Something about his eyes really scared me. So, a bit more walking and he continues to fall very close. I say to my friend that I have to tie my shoe. This is a reason for him to pass us. In case he's following us, we'll realise. She immediately catches on to what I'm doing and we pull over. He looks very startled, and she politely says hello, and he just stares. This is when I notice that he is carrying a stick. As I'm fiddling with my shoe, she stands between us and he passes us. We wait to give him some short distance ahead, but immediately he slows down. We now wait for a bit longer, and he gets to the furthest part of the trail that has sight lines to us, and he turns around, looking up at us. We decided that something feels wrong about this guy, and we don't want to press him or pass him again. So we turn around and walk back up the trail towards a park with the tables and parking. A few minutes later of walking up the trail, I look back and see he's on the trail too. He's following us. I tell my friend to walk faster. We book it up the trail and get to the parking lot area we were at before. We start to strategize and wait, deciding that we will wait to see if he comes back up the trail to the lot. There are more people around here, so we feel safer waiting it out. About 20 minutes go by, nothing. We are talking about how that could mean that he kept going on the trail and is long gone, or is waiting on the trail where it's more desolated. While we're thinking this, we see a couple come up from the trail we're on, presumably taking the loop in the opposite direction we're on. We approach them and ask if they saw the guy there. They tell us they saw a young man sitting on a rock about halfway down. They describe the man as following us. We explain our interaction with him to the wife and go back and forth in conversation. The husband says we need to call a ranger. He wasn't just sitting there, he was carving a stick with a knife. He's clearly armed. Needless to say, we call a ranger. The nice couple walked that fast leg with us to make sure that we can get to our car safely, and gave us their number in case we need anything. The rangers then rushed to the trail, but there's no sign of him. I wish I knew where he went and what happened to him, but I'm glad that I followed my instincts. I hate to think of what he would have done with a knife to us, out in the isolated part. A few months back, my girlfriend and I decide we're bored hanging around the house and spontaneously decide to go out for a hike. We don't go hiking often, but the idea appeals to both of us, and even though there was only about an hour left of light, we figure we have enough time to enjoy a hike before it gets too dark. We quickly fill our water bottles and put on the best walking shoes we had, and with that, we're out the door. Around my area, there are many hiking trails, with the variety of trails increasing as you go into the mountains. We intended to stay around the base of the mountains in the occasional case of us hiking, where most people would still be walking. We wanted to change things up and progress further up the mountain road of the trail that a friend of mine had mentioned to me. We kept in mind our time and figured that we could hike for a bit and simply enjoy the environment around us before it's too late. When we arrive at the trailhead, we see there are no cars left along the road where the trail commences, but didn't think much of it due to the time. We still had a good 45 minutes until dark, so we continue on. We start walking down a fairly steep hill. Then, this recoups the elevation at the bottom with an equally steep hill that you have to ascend. We reach the top, then it's smooth sailing from there. We see a lone coyote off the trail, some rabbits, and I made a quip about how those rabbits might need to be careful with the coyote lurking round. Approximately less than a mile into the trail, we see a large fallen tree that made a bridge over the dried riverbed and decide to take a rest, climb around it, take some pictures. We're there for about 10 minutes and then resume hiking. We continue on the trail for a short distance until she hears a rustle behind us. We stop, mildly spooked due to the assumption size of whatever made the rustling, but continue on only briefly before she decides she's done and that we need to head back. It's twilight now, so I agree with her. We turn around and head back to the car. When we made it back to the fallen tree, my shoe had come untied, so I used the trunk to fix my shoelaces and looked behind us for the first time on the hike. Now I can see a person dressed in entirely black with their hood on, a significant distance behind us, walking at a slow, even pace. Now it's not something out of the ordinary, but why all black? It doesn't make any sense. It's now dusk. We continue on at an intentionally faster pace and go through a winding section of the trail, and I lose sight of the person. When we come around the final section of the bend, I figure they're far behind us and there's nothing to worry about. Sooner than later though, they're behind us but much closer, probably 50 feet in comparison to 100 feet before. We had increased our speed, and they have too, so this alarms us. We briskly walk around another bend, and as soon as we come around, we book it. It seemed to be a natural reaction on both of our parts as we start running without saying a word. We are nearing the trailhead now, with only the hills to deal with. We catch our breaths for a moment, and I turn around again. I see the person seemingly come to a halt and look back at me, as if they were trying to uphold the illusion of simply walking. At this point, I shout go, and we both sprint to the hill. What little light is left is making it very hard to get through here without tripping. We're both stumbling down it now, almost falling multiple times. quite worried that I'm going to twist an ankle, but we make it to the bottom, but must continue up the initial hill, and then we'll have made it out. We preserve up the incline and make it back to the car. I have a sigh of relief, my heart pounding and adrenaline racing as I start my car. I go into reverse and what do I see? The same person emerges, breathing heavily. We finally get a glimpse of him. He has a pale complexion and dead eyes, and has a furious look on his face and was holding something in his hands. I don't take a second to see it, I just speed out of there, leaving him in the dust. I was backpacking through Pisgah National Forest in NC with my dog, just the two of us. We were exploring the woods around Little Coast Cove, open orienteering style, so we're not on an established trail. We'd been hiking throughout the day, following a circle, and towards the evening, I realised my dog isn't acting normal. She's very much caught up in the scent of something, and she won't let up. That night in the camp, she remained on edge, and startled off into the woods line, stopping, then came back to me, staring. I went about camp business as usual. Then, at around midnight, I got this prickle like I'm being watched intently. I let the feeling ride over for a little, but then I heard a rustle by the bush. I got up from the fire, pointing my flashlight towards the hillside, and a figure on all fours just manages to escape the beam, all but the towel. It was a towel I knew was not supposed to exist in the southern Appalachians. I cast my light again across the hillside and caught its eyes, two yellow glowing orbs, watching and waiting. At this point, I went into fury, grabbing my tomahawk, and charged up the hill line after the beast, screaming. The watcher wandered off, but neither I nor the dog slept at all that night. The following morning we left camp. At first light, I began hiking up the mountain to the ridgeline which would lead us out. Atop the ridgeline is a fresh mud track with a series of tracks left by an animal that no longer is supposed to exist in the US. They're catamount tracks, or what I believe to be. They commonly go by cougars in the east, but we've been stalked by a mountain lion just the same. Those tracks ran across the ridge, revealing that it had been watching us throughout the previous day. They weren't bobcat tracks, I know that. They were way too big, and I saw the eyes. I truly believe that one's escaped, and if it wasn't for my dog, I would have been mauled to death that night. The neighbourhood where I grew up was more or less suburbs, except the back end of it that borders a massive field where nothing has been planted in decades. Part of that border is buffered by woods, and it's in those woods where my friends and I would play. One day, we were particularly deep in the little section of forest. We were attempting to pick through what looks like overgrown dozer tracks. The woods are thick across NT, but the central/eastern proportion is thick with kudus in particular, and it has given us hell. We had probably made a mile of progress in this track when we come across a depression full of water. I hesitate to even say it as a pond, because it was perfectly round like a crater. The water had obviously receded in the middle, and was exposing the roof of an old car. At about this time, one friend found a license plate under a pine duff. It was tagged with buckshot. Next door, A full car door had been buried under a pine duff, riddled with bullet holes. Now it's certainly not an uncommon way to have fun in the South. Go out, have a few beers and shoot some junk with your friends. But what we found next, however, wasn't a run-of-the-mill Saturday night. We find bones. Our still innocent minds first assumed it was a white-tailed deer. We started dragging out the bones and laying them out by the side. Not sure if our objective was to make a museum quality deer skeleton or what, but that's what we did. Then the pelvis came up. I immediately recognized it because my uncle was a chiropractor and had a full model skeleton in his office called Mr. Bones that I would look at. The more I started to look at our growing collection, the more I started to see Mr. Bones taking shape. I got a gut feeling about being the oldest and I told us to stop digging. Something really doesn't feel right here. There was some protest, but I convinced everyone. Now we start hiking back the way we come from, but I can't stop thinking about those bones. That night, I told my mum what I found, then I had to tell my dad the story. At first, they're convinced that I'm just a dumb kid, but I knew what I saw out there. They talked behind closed doors, going back and forth. The next day, I told the story to 2 sheriff deputies and took them out to the area where I found this in the woods. About an hour later, there were police vehicles entering, packing the tiny dead end leading off into the woods. Chainsaws cleared the brush, and men in white suits with detective badges smoked cigarettes and talked amongst the other men as they carried bags from the forest, putting them into the vehicles. Then they were gone. And I waited months and months to hear anything, but nothing comes back. I asked my parents what happened, and they don't really know much about it. Eventually I stopped asking questions for the most part, and it faded back into my memory. Until one day I was home from college sitting by the fire with an old neighbourhood friend who had been there that day. He saw everything I saw. We started talking about it for the next few hours. We started doing research online but can't find anything. It was so baffling. I asked my parents the next day and they still have no idea what I'm talking about. His parents said the same thing. To this day they're so adamant that nothing happened. It's crazy.